Ilara Ven had learned to make herself invisible. It was not a skill she was born with. It was something the world had taught her, one cruel lesson at a time. She walked through the metal corridors of Bastion Krev with her head down and her shoulders hunched. The exoskeletal brace, wrapped around her legs, hummed quietly with each step. Without it, she could not walk at all. Her muscles had been weak since birth, a genetic mistake that the doctors should have caught before she left the growth tanks. That was what her father always said, anyway. A mistake. The orbital station hung above a world that humanity was fighting to keep. Through the observation windows, she could see the brown and green planet below, scarred with the marks of war. The hegemony wanted it. Humanity refused to give it up. And so, young men and women in armor went down to die in the mud, while Ilara organized old boxes in the archive. She was 23 years old. She had never fired a weapon. She had never kissed anyone. She had never done anything that mattered. The archive was located in the deepest part of the station, far from the command decks where her father gave orders, and far from the training halls where real soldiers prepared for battle. It was a tomb for forgotten things, and Ilara fit right in. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The room was vast and filled with shelves that reached toward the ceiling. On those shelves sat thousands of objects, taken from dead worlds and defeated enemies. Alien weapons that no one understood, texts written in languages that no one could read, artifacts that hummed with strange energy but refused to work for human hands. Ilara's job was simple. She cataloged these items. She wrote descriptions. She made sure nothing was lost. It was work for someone who could not do anything else. She settled into her chair and began sorting through the latest shipment. The crates had come from a salvage operation on a world called Verath 7. The planet had been dead for 1,000,000 years. Its civilization turned to dust long before humans learned to make fire. But the ruins still held treasures, and the fleet collected them, hoping to find something useful. Most of it was junk, broken machines, fragments of metal, pieces of art that had lost all meaning. Then her fingers touched something different. It was a blade. Slender and simple, with a hilt wrapped in material that felt like leather but was something else entirely. The metal of the blade was dull, gray, almost ugly. There was nothing special about it at first glance, but when Ilara touched it, she felt something move inside her chest, like a door opening, like a voice calling from very far away. She pulled her hand back quickly. Her heart was beating fast. She looked around the archive, but she was alone. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and touched the blade again. This time, the feeling was stronger. It was not pain. It was not pleasure. It was recognition. As if the blade had been waiting for her. As if it knew her name. She picked it up. It weighed almost nothing in her weak hands. She turned it over, looking for markings, for symbols, for anything that might explain what she was feeling. There was nothing, just dull metal and strange leather. But deep inside the blade, something was waking up. Ilara did not tell anyone about her discovery. She hid the blade in her quarters, tucked beneath her mattress like a secret. Every night, she took it out and held it. Every night, the connection grew stronger. She began to dream. In her dreams, she saw beings of light moving through darkness. They were tall and beautiful, and they carried blades just like hers. They did not fight with strength. They fought with something else. Something she did not have words for. She searched the archive's records and found references to an ancient species called the Luminara. They had ruled 1,000 worlds 1,000,000 years ago. They had possessed weapons of impossible power, and then they had vanished, leaving behind only ruins and silence. The blades they carried were called Covenant Shards. Hundreds had been found over the centuries. Thousands of warriors had tried to activate them. None had succeeded. The weapons remained dark and cold, refusing all who touched them, except for Ilara. She did not understand why. She was the weakest human on the station. She could barely climb a flight of stairs. Her hands shook when she lifted anything heavier than a book. By every measure that mattered, she was worthless. But the blade had chosen her anyway. One night, alone in her quarters, she held the weapon and whispered a question into the darkness. Why me? The answer came not in words but in images. She saw a great war. She saw civilizations burning. She saw the Luminara standing against the darkness, their blades burning with white fire. And she understood something that made her want to cry. The Luminara had not chosen their champions based on strength. Strength was common. Strength was easy. Any creature with enough muscle could be strong. The Luminara valued something rarer. They valued will that had been tested, spirits that had been broken and rebuilt, souls that had learned to burn not because life was easy, but because it was hard. They chose the ones who had every reason to quit and never did. Alara looked down at her thin arms. She looked at the brace that held her upright. She thought about all the years of pain and shame and loneliness, and she realized that her weakness was not a mistake. It was a key. She gripped the blade tighter. Deep inside the metal, something stirred. A light began to glow, faint at first, then brighter. The blade was waking up. After 1,000,000 years of silence, it was finally ready to speak. And Alara Ven, the hollow child that no one wanted, was ready to listen. She did not know that war was coming to Bastion Krev. She did not know that everything she believed about herself was about to change. She only knew that for the first time in her life, she was holding something that believed in her. It was enough. It was a beginning. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and distant. But inside her small room, a new light was being born. Number. Everyone called her Frail, until her sword lighted up the skies. Number. Part 2. The Weight of Light. The blade changed Alara in ways she did not expect. Her body remained weak. Her muscles still trembled. Her legs still needed the brace to carry her weight. But her eyes had become different. She began to see things that others could not see. It started small. She noticed cracks in the walls that no one else noticed. She saw patterns in the way people moved, tiny hesitations and weaknesses that revealed their fears. She looked at machines and somehow knew which parts would break first. At first, she thought she was going crazy. Then she found an old text in the archive that explained everything. The Luminara did not see the world the way other species did. They saw the fractures in reality itself. Every person, every object, every moment had weak points, places where things could bend, places where they could break. The Covenant shards taught their wielders to see these fractures and to cut along them with perfect precision. It was not about strength. It was about understanding. The Luminara were not warriors. They were surgeons of possibility. Alara practiced in secret. She would stare at objects and try to see their fractures. A cup, a chair, a door. Slowly, the skill grew stronger. She began to see the invisible lines that ran through everything. She also began to understand the cost. Each time she used this sight, she felt tired in a way that sleep could not fix. The blade was teaching her, but the lessons were not free. They took something from her. Thanks for watching. She did not know what yet. 3 weeks after she found the blade, the hegemony attacked. It happened without warning. One moment, Bastion Krev was operating normally. The next moment, alarms were screaming, and the station was shaking from weapons fire. Alara was in the archive when the first explosion hit. She fell to the floor, her brace sparking from the impact. Emergency lights painted everything red. Through the speakers, she heard her father's voice giving orders. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. The hegemony is here. She tried to stand, but her brace was damaged. The servos whined and failed. She could only crawl. Then she heard something worse than the alarms. She heard screaming. Not the screaming of fear, but the screaming of people dying. The hegemony had not just attacked from outside. They had sent soldiers inside the station, infiltrators, killers. Ilara pulled herself behind a shelf and listened. Heavy footsteps were moving through the corridor outside. Not human footsteps. These were the sharp, clicking steps of the Vreth, the insectoid soldiers that served as the hegemony's shock troops. The Vreth were nightmares given form. 8 feet tall. 4 arms. Bodies covered in armor that grew from their own flesh. They had been bred for one purpose only: to kill everything that was not hegemony. Through the gap beneath the door, Ilara saw them pass. 3 of them. Their movements were perfect, synchronized, almost beautiful. They did not speak. They did not need to. They shared a hive mind that made them act as one. After they passed, Ilara tried to move again. Her brace was completely dead now. She would have to drag herself. She had almost reached the door when it exploded inward. A Vreth stood in the doorway. It had come back. It had sensed her somehow. Its compound eyes looked down at her with no emotion. No mercy. No anything. To the Vreth, she was just meat that needed to be removed. It raised one of its bladed arms. Ilara did not think. She reached into her coat and pulled out the blade she had been hiding. The Covenant shard felt warm in her hand. Alive. Please, she whispered. Not to the Vreth. To the blade. Please help me. The blade answered. Light exploded from the weapon. Not light like a lamp or a fire. Light like a star being born. It filled the room. The corridor. The entire section of the station. Sensors a kilometer away registered it as a detonation. The Vreth stumbled backward. Its perfect coordination shattered. For the first time in its life, it felt something it had never felt before. Confusion. The light was inside its mind, cutting along fractures that it did not know it had. Ilara saw it all. She saw the weak points in the creature's armor. She saw the hesitation in its movements. She saw the fracture in its certainty. The tiny crack where its absolute confidence met the impossible reality of this moment. She moved without thinking. Her body was broken, but the blade guided her hand. She did not swing with strength. She did not need to. She simply placed the edge of the blade against the fracture and let it cut. The Vreth fell. Its body hit the floor in 2 pieces. Ilara stared at what she had done. Her hands were shaking. The blade's light was fading, but not disappearing entirely. It glowed softly, waiting. More footsteps. More Vreth coming. She could hear them clicking down the corridor. She should have been afraid. She should have tried to hide. But something had changed inside her. The fractures she could see were not just in objects anymore. They were in the air. In the moment. In the future itself, she saw a path. A way through the impossible. The Vreth came around the corner and found something they did not expect. A small, human woman with dead legs and trembling arms, standing in a pool of their brother's blood, holding a blade of white fire. They hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Ilara moved along the fractures. She cut where reality was weakest. She did not fight like a soldier, because she was not a soldier. She fought like water, finding cracks in stone. She fought like time wearing down mountains. When it was over, 5 Vreth lay dead at her feet. She collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Blood ran from her nose. Her vision was blurring. The blade had taken something from her. Something important. But she was alive. And somewhere in her chest, a fire was burning that had never burned before. The station's defenders found her an hour later. They did not believe what they saw. The frail girl from the archive, surrounded by the bodies of hegemony elites. One of the soldiers looked at the blade in her hand. It was dull again. Just gray metal and strange leather. "What is that?" he asked. Ilara looked down at the weapon. She thought about all the years of being invisible. All the years of being nothing. "I don't know," she said. "But I think it's mine." The soldier helped her up. The war was still raging around them, but something had shifted. Something had changed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Number. Everyone called her Frail. Until her sword lighted up the skies. Number. Part 3. The name. They couldn't speak. The footage spread across every human world within a week. Someone had been recording when Alara killed the Vreth. The security cameras had captured everything. The small woman with dead legs. The monsters that should have torn her apart. The impossible light. The impossible victory. People watched the video millions of times. They slowed it down. They enhanced it. They studied every frame. And they could not explain what they saw. The girl did not fight like a human. She moved like she knew where the Vreth would be before they got there. She cut where their armor was weakest, where no one could see weakness. She did something that broke every rule of combat that humanity had ever known. And she did it with a body that could barely stand on its own. Alara woke up in a military hospital to find her face on every screen. The doctors told her she was famous. The doctors told her she was a hero. The doctors told her that everything was going to be different now. She did not feel like a hero. She felt tired in her bones. The blade had taken something from her when she used it. She could feel a hollow space inside herself that had not been there before, but she also felt something else. Something that scared her more than the emptiness. She felt hungry for more. The Terran High Command summoned her within days. They sent a shuttle to bring her to the command ship, a massive vessel called the Iron Promise. Generals and admirals wanted to see the weapon. Scientists wanted to study it. Politicians wanted to shake her hand and take pictures. They tested the blade in every way they could imagine. They scanned it. They measured it. They tried to understand what made it work. They found nothing. The blade looked like ordinary metal. It gave off no energy. It showed no special properties. Then they tried to bond it to someone else. 12 volunteers. All of them were the best soldiers humanity had. All of them were strong and brave and perfect in every way that Alara was not. The blade rejected every single one. When they touched it, nothing happened. The weapon remained cold and dark. It did not answer. It did not wake. It was as if it was not there at all. Only when Alara held it did the blade come alive. Only her touch made the light return. The scientists were confused. The generals were frustrated. But they were also desperate. The war with the hegemony was going badly. Humanity was losing on every front. They were running out of ships, running out of soldiers, running out of time. They needed a weapon. They needed a symbol. And Alara was the only one available. "We want to give you a commission," said Admiral Chen, the commander of the fleet. "We want you to serve as a special operative. You would answer directly to High Command." Alara sat in her wheelchair and looked at the old man. She saw the fractures in him, the fear he was hiding, the doubt that kept him awake at night. He did not believe humanity could win this war. He was grasping at anything that might save them. "You don't want me," she said. "You want the blade." "We want both," he admitted. "But we will take what we can get." She should have refused. She knew that. She was not a soldier. She had never been trained for war. Her body was broken, and her mind was still learning to understand the gift she had been given. But she thought about the people on Bastion Krev. She thought about the colonists on the planet below. She thought about all the humans across all the worlds who were afraid of the darkness coming for them. "I'll do it," she said. That night, her father came to see her. Admiral Castor Venn stood in the doorway of her quarters and looked at her like she was a stranger. "You should refuse," he said. "Give them the blade and walk away. The blade won't work for anyone else. Then throw it into a star. Destroy it." Alara stared at him. She had spent her whole life wanting his approval, wanting him to look at her with something other than disappointment. Now he was looking at her with something new, something she had never seen before. He was terrified of her. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you want me to stop?" He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Because I've seen what war does to people. I've seen what weapons do to the ones who carry them. That blade will eat you alive, Alara. It will take everything you are and leave nothing behind. Maybe there wasn't much to begin with, she said. He flinched like she had hit him. She had not meant to be cruel. She had only meant to tell the truth. I spent my whole life being nothing, she continued. I was the hollow child. The mistake. The thing that killed Mother just by existing. You never looked at me. You never talked to me. You never gave me anything except your shame. Elara. No, let me finish. She lifted the blade. In her hand, it began to glow softly. This is the first thing that ever chose me. The first thing that ever saw me as something other than broken. Maybe it will destroy me. Maybe I only have a few years left. But they will be my years. They will mean something. And that's more than I ever had before. Her father had no answer. He stood there in the doorway, old and tired and afraid. And for the first time, Elara realized that he had always been afraid. Not of her. Of losing her the way he lost his wife. He had pushed her away because he thought distance would hurt less than grief. He was wrong. But she understood him now. Go, she said gently. I have work to do. He left without another word. The next morning, Elara Ven put on a uniform for the first time. It hung loose on her thin frame. The medals they pinned to her chest felt like lies. But she straightened her spine and wheeled herself out to meet her new command. She was no longer invisible. The hegemony had given her a name. They called her the Pale Blade. It was time to show them why they should be afraid. Everyone called her Frail, until her sword lighted up the skies. Part 4, the breaking point. They gave her the soldiers that nobody else wanted. The unit was called the Vanguard Remnants. 47 men and women who had been broken by war and put back together wrong. Some had injuries that never healed right. Some had minds that had cracked under pressure. Some had made mistakes so terrible that their records were stained forever. High Command sent Elara to lead them because they expected her to fail. If the Pale Blade died, surrounded by other failures, it would be a tragedy but not a surprise. The generals would shake their heads and move on to the next desperate plan. The remnants expected nothing from her. They had heard the stories. They had seen the videos. But they looked at her thin arms and her wheelchair, and they saw what everyone always saw. Weakness. The first time she addressed them, they barely listened. I know what you're thinking, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried. You're thinking they sent you a joke. A cripple with a magic sword. You're thinking we're all going to die. No one argued. It was what they were all thinking. You might be right, Elara continued. But I've been dying my whole life. Every day, my body fights against me. Every day, I wake up weaker than I was the year before. And I'm still here. Not because I'm strong, because I'm too stubborn to stop. She looked at their faces. She saw their fractures. Not as weaknesses, but as battle scars. These people had been broken. Yes, but they had also survived. That meant something. They threw us away because they think broken things are useless. They're wrong. Broken things have sharp edges. Broken things have learned what they're made of. And broken things don't have anything left to lose. Something changed in the room. Not much, just a flicker. But Elara saw it, a spark catching fire. I'm not going to promise you victory, she said. I'm not going to promise you'll live. But I promise you this. If we fall together. And we fall forward. Does anyone have a problem with that? No one spoke. Good. 6 weeks later, the hegemony launched their assault on Korthax Prime. It was the largest attack of the war. 3 full battle fleets. Millions of soldiers. The hegemony had decided that humanity needed to learn a lesson. ATT. They would crush this world so completely that no one would ever resist them again. Korthax Prime was home to 12 million human colonists. Men, women, children, families, communities, lives. The planet's defense force was outnumbered 50 to 1. The remnants were deployed to the Ashenvale Corridor, a mountain pass that connected the enemy landing zones to the capital city. If the pass fell, the enemy would flood through and the city would burn. Hold this position, their orders said. Reinforcements will arrive in 72 hours. Everyone knew the truth. Reinforcements were not coming. They were being sacrificed to buy time. 72 hours, said Sergeant Cade, Ilara's second in command. He was a big man with scars on his face and ghosts in his eyes. Against 3 hegemony divisions. That's impossible. Probably, Ilara agreed. But I've always been bad at math. The first attack came at dawn. Vreath shock troops poured up the valley like a river of blades. The remnants held their positions and fired until their weapons overheated. Ilara moved among them. Not fighting yet. Just watching. Seeing. She saw the patterns in the enemy advance. She saw where they would strike and where they would feint. She gave orders that did not make sense until they did. Fall back here. Push forward there. Concentrate fire on that point. Ignore everything else. The Vreth were not used to enemies who could read them. Their perfect coordination became a weakness. They moved as one, which meant they failed as one. The first day ended with the pass still in human hands. The second day was worse. The hegemony brought in heavy armor. Walking tanks that could shrug off anything the remnants had. The casualties started to mount. Ilara used the blade for the first time since Bastion Krev. She walked out into the valley and faced a siege engine alone. The light that exploded from her weapon was visible from orbit. When it faded, the siege engine was in pieces, and Ilara was on her knees, coughing blood. "Ma'am," Cade said, helping her up. "You can't keep doing that." "I know," she whispered. "But they can't stop doing this." The third day came. The remnants were down to 23 soldiers. The ammunition was running out. The walls of the pass were crumbling. And then the hegemony sent their champion. Warlord Prime Kethrix had never lost a battle. He stood 9 feet tall, encased in living armor that had been grown from his own flesh and enhanced with technology that humanity could not understand. He had killed 6 human generals in personal combat. His name was a curse on 100 worlds. He came to the pass with 10,000 soldiers behind him. "Send out the Pale Blade," he broadcast, "or I will kill every human on this planet, starting with the children." Ilara listened to the message in silence. She looked at her remnants. They were exhausted, wounded, barely standing. They had given everything. "Stay here," she told them. "Commander, no. That's an order." She grabbed her blade and began walking toward the mouth of the pass. Her exobrace was damaged. Each step was agony. But she kept moving. She emerged from the fortifications and saw Kethrix waiting for her. An army at his back. Victory in his eyes. "You are smaller than I expected," he said. "I get that a lot. I will mount your head on my ship. Your species will remember this day as the beginning of their end." Ilara raised her blade. The light began to build. The duel was brief and terrible. Kethrix was everything humanity feared. Fast, strong, ancient beyond counting. His blows should have broken her in half. But Ilara was not trying to match his strength. She was looking for his fractures. She found them. Deep in his certainty was a crack. A tiny doubt. He had won so many times that he had forgotten what it felt like to face someone who was not afraid of him. Ilara was afraid, yes, but not of death. She had lived with death her whole life. It was an old friend. She stopped fighting and started cutting. Not at his armor. At his confidence. At the absolute belief that he could not lose. The blade found the fracture. The light poured in. Kethrix fell. His army stood frozen in shock. Their warlord prime, their unkillable god, lay dead at the feet of a creature they had considered prey. Ilara turned to face them. Blood ran from her eyes, her nose, her ears. Her body was shutting down. But she raised her blade one more time. "Who's next?" No one moved. "That's what I thought." She collapsed. The last thing she heard was Cade screaming her name and the sound of the hegemony army retreating. Her heart stopped twice before the medics brought her back. But the pass held. And 12 million people lived to see another sunrise. Number everyone. Called her Frail, until her sword lighted up the skies. Number. Part 5. The Light That Remains. Elara woke up 3 months later. Her body was ruined. The doctors did not hide it from her. The blade had taken too much. Her muscles had degraded past any hope of recovery. Her heart had been damaged. Her nervous system was scarred in ways they could not repair. She would never walk again, not even with a brace. She might not live past 40. Every system in her body was failing. Slowly, but surely, she was dying. She had been dying her whole life. The only difference now was that she knew exactly how the story ended. But outside her hospital window, something incredible was happening. The footage from Ashenvale Corridor had spread across every human world. Not just the duel with Kethrix. Everything. The 3 days of impossible defense. The woman in the wheelchair leading soldiers who had been thrown away. The final stand that should have failed. People were watching. People were crying. And people were standing up. Recruitment centers that had been empty for years were suddenly overflowing. Factories that had been shutting down were working again. Politicians who had been talking about surrender were suddenly silent. Humanity had been losing this war for a decade. They had forgotten how to believe in themselves. And then, they saw a frail woman kill a god with a blade made of light. If she could do that, what excuse did anyone else have? The hegemony noticed. They were not stupid. They understood what was happening. A symbol was rising among their enemies. A flame that could burn away the despair they had worked so hard to spread. They sent an offer. A ceasefire. Negotiations. Peace. There was one condition. The pale blade must be surrendered. Elara Ven must be given to them. She was too dangerous to exist. The Terran Assembly debated for 6 days. Elara watched the debates from her hospital bed. She saw the arguments going back and forth. She saw the politicians calculating the cost of war versus the cost of giving her up. She saw her father speak in favor of the deal, his voice shaking, unable to look at the cameras. He was still trying to save her. In his own broken way, he was still trying. On the 7th day, Elara asked to address the assembly. They brought her into the great chamber in a medical chair. She was wrapped in blankets. Her skin was pale. Her voice was barely loud enough for the microphones to catch. But everyone listened. "I know what you're discussing," she said. "You're wondering if I'm worth more than peace. You're wondering if one woman is worth more lives lost. And the truth is, I'm not. I'm just one person. I'm frail. I'm dying. I've never been worth much to anyone." She paused to breathe. Even speaking was hard now. "But this isn't about me. It never was. They're not afraid of Elara Ven. They're afraid of what I represent. They're afraid that you'll realize what I realized on that mountain pass." She looked out at the assembled leaders of humanity. Thousands of faces. Thousands of fractures. Thousands of hidden fears. They called me frail because my body doesn't work right. But I've learned something. Frailty isn't weakness. Frailty is what makes strength mean something. Anyone can fight when everything is easy. But fighting when you're broken? Fighting when you have every reason to quit? That's something else entirely. She lifted her hand, trembling. The blade was not with her. It was locked in a vault somewhere, too dangerous to bring into the assembly. But everyone saw it anyway. They saw the light that had burned across a battlefield. If you give me to them, you're not buying peace. You're buying time. They'll come back. They'll always come back. Because as long as we're willing to trade our hope for safety, they know we can be beaten. Her voice grew stronger, even as her body weakened. I'm not asking you to fight for me. I'm asking you to fight for yourselves. For the people who were told they weren't good enough. For the colonies that were written off. For everyone who ever looked in the mirror and saw something broken, staring back. She met the eyes of her father, sitting in the back of the chamber. We are not the sum of our weaknesses. We are the fire that burns despite them. And no one, not the hegemony, not our own fears, not anything in this universe, gets to take that from us. The assembly voted that night. The ceasefire was rejected. The war would continue. But it would be a different war now. Elara did not fight again. Her body would not allow it. Instead, she became something else. She became a teacher. They brought her the broken ones. The soldiers who had lost hope. The officers who had cracked under pressure. The young recruits who were terrified of what was coming. She taught them what she had learned. She could not show them how to use a covenant shard. The blade was hers alone. But she could show them how to see, how to find the fractures in their enemies and in themselves, how to turn weakness into understanding, how to burn when everything in the universe told them to go cold. The war lasted another 12 years. Elara watched it from afar, growing weaker, getting older, knowing the end was coming. She saw humanity push back. She saw worlds reclaimed. She saw the hegemony, for the first time in their ancient history, learn what it meant to face an enemy who would not break. When the hegemony finally sued for peace, real peace, without conditions, Elara was 51 years old. She had outlived every prediction the doctors had made. She died 6 months later, quietly, in a room overlooking a garden. The blade was in her hand. It had grown dim over the years, its light fading as she faded. When she took her last breath, it went dark forever. But that was not the end of the story, because across 1,000 worlds, people remembered. Soldiers who had trained under her carried her teachings to their own students. Writers told her story. Parents whispered her name to children who were afraid of the dark. They did not remember her because she was strong. They remembered her because she was frail, because she was broken, because she was everything they feared becoming, and she had become something beautiful instead. The hegemony had been right to fear her, not because of the blade, because of what she proved. Strength is common. Strength is easy. But will? Will that has been forged in suffering? Will that burns brightest when everything is darkest? That was something the universe had never seen before, and it belonged to humanity now. Forever. On her grave, they carved only 5 words. They were enough. She chose not to kneel.